Hi, everybody. Welcome to Ontology 101. It's part of the 6-week cycle that we follow. The first two sessions of the cycle will engage or start with subject matter expert engagement. So we basically, over those two meetings, we practice and drill how exactly to solicit information from subject matter experts that we can use later, and we use in this cycle in the subsequent two sessions to build out design patterns, so kind of visual representations of structures that can answer the questions that we've elicited or solicited from the subject matter experts, which sets us up for the final two legs of the cycle where we build ontological representations that reflect those design patterns. So again, this is the first this is a new cycle, so we've completed one. We go two, two, two. Today we'll be discussing subject matter expertise engagement. And as I just mentioned, we do this by drilling. So it's a very much a hands-on with some expert guidance kind of situation to kick us off and get into this in earnest. What we'll need, much like any kind of ad-libbing or improv session that you may have encountered in your life, what we'll need is a domain and at least one volunteer subject matter expert. So some topic, some area that we want to focus in on, and we'll say the SME is the SME for that area. And then the rest of us will start poking and prodding and asking questions based on, or so that we can identify pain points that the subject matter expert is experiencing that we can use while we're constructing models that can help them. So I will now offer to the floor. Who wants to be our SME target, and what domain will they be an expert in? Hmm,
Hmm.
nerve-wracking, huh? Alec, don't you want to be our cyber expert?
I was gonna volunteer. I unfortunately have to leave at 11:30ish, so I thought maybe
Nice.
that would throw a wrench in things if I was this me.
Yeah, fair enough.
What kind of cyber topic is it? Maybe I can stand in or
Yeah.
Cyber threat analysis.
cyber threat analysis.
Mhm.
Well, interesting enough. I know the industry, by the way, is really in need of a model to formalize it because they're not advancing because it
Mhm.
stays on the level of TCP ports and other stuff and they cannot connect stuff.
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it's a
It's a
big
really
thing.
good point. That's one of the fastest growing areas of ontology modeling. There are a lot of different efforts. Alec is actually in
Okay.
charge of
Oh,
he's the
oh yeah,
chair of an
sure.
IEEE session or group that is creating a
Ah,
cyber
of
ontology.
course. I forgot. Sorry, Alec. Yeah, I
A
knew
lot of
that.
stuff going on. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's see. Should we do cyber threat or should we pick something else? Dealer's choice.
It's
Fine.
abstract, but it's exciting.
It is exciting. A lot of interesting things to pull out of it and a lot of thorny ontological issues that come up, but also ones that I think really highlight some of the value that we bring in our disambiguating of structures. So, because we interplay so carefully, especially in the cyberspace, between information patterns and what they're putatively about, hardware and software, right? And they're often conflated, even
Okay.
among ontologists, unfortunately. So, okay, how does everybody feel about that? We're good with cyber? Hearing no objections. Okay,
Let's give it a go.
let's do it. So let's poke at Sonny. All right, John's on board. Let's poke at Sonny. Let's ask Sonny some questions. So, welcome. Thank you so much for having us. We're here to help. We're ontologists. Don't really need to know too much about what that word means. We build structures. We're basically building structures, and we're going to try to do our best to both identify your pain points in your day-to-day workflow, or more generally in workflows that you see coming down the pipe. But mostly here today, we're trying to like identify, see a description as carefully as we can of how you use data, what data you use, and what problems you encounter that make your life difficult. Now, we're not going to be able to solve all of them. That's true. We come in kind of curious about this so that because we can often find ways to help address or ameliorate some of the issues you're facing in perhaps surprising ways based on the modeling strategies that we adopt. But we're often set up here as just trying to get in these initial meetings a setup for what you're doing and how it can be improved. So to that end, we'll ask you some questions, poke a little bit, try to dig deep. But initially, if you don't mind, would you share with us what do you do? How do you play with data? What data do you play with? If
Well, being a cyber threat security expert, I dig into a lot of data.
Hmm.
It's very common to look at network traffic, obviously, also application logs, logs specifically also of firewalls,
Mhm.
to see if there is any activity. Also logs of outgoing traffic and ingoing traffic. Uh, if there's anything funny going out, we want to know that, because then you might be compromised. And if anything comes in that you don't want to come in, yeah, you also want to prevent that. So basically, it's data,
Yeah,
all around.
looking for some patterns, I would imagine. The inputs out.
Yeah, and yeah, and cyber criminals are after data in the end. I mean, it's not
Sure.
like they can steal your beer through the internet. They can't, but they can steal the data about your beer.
Right. And you're often on the back foot, right? Like it's very much, as I understand, like a reactive sort of let's see where the problems are as they come in. How do we address, as opposed to say the hackers on the other side who are like aggressive, like we can kind of poke wherever, and you might not know where we're coming. So yeah.
Yeah, I think the challenge is, I mean, ideally you want to lock everything down and sort of sit at the perimeter, like in the old times. There you put somebody in front of the castle, and then things are okay.
Mhm.
But that's not tenable, because you have to let people in. I mean, employees want
Mhm.
clients, customers want to get in. So per definition, yeah, you're sort of penetrable, because
Mhm.
that's the goal of a network, that it's partially open.
That's
So
right.
you're always sort of figuring out, like, hey, how do we provide the openness without the threats that come from the openness? But yeah, with the openness come also the threats. So
That's
it's
right.
continuously, yeah, it's looking for a balance, how to actively monitor sort of like what's coming in and going in, but also, yeah, watching inside, like, hey, maybe somebody is already in.
Mhm.
And you have like things like honeypots going on, but like also said, outgoing traffic. There's all kinds of ways to make sure that the damage, if anything happens, that you mitigate it as fast as possible.
Right, right. So I'm going to pause here. So John, Alec, Dottie, saw a little bit of a back and forth, a preliminary one. What are you taking from this? Have you learned anything? And if so, what have you learned?
Try to go after like uh,
Uh, hard to make out what you're saying exactly. You sound a bit like
I'm saying and go get enough.
okay. Yeah, still not catching that. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Maybe type it if you want. You can type it. Maybe Alec or John can jump in.
Yeah, so I learned that the domain is uh, a rather broad domain, and that our expert is very passionate about what they do. But for our modeling efforts, we know we should start asking some more precise questions
Mhm.
about potentially the not in these words, but is there some sort of schema that or schemas that they're using? What kind of objects do they collect data about?
Mhm.
That thing.
Good.
Um, Maybe I missed something. I don't know if there's any um, like directly relevant information that came out of like the first back and forth between the SME. It's sort of just like familiarizing one another.
Mhm.
Uh,
That's good. So it's good. I was hoping you would point this out. So I want you to observe what was happening. So sometimes when you're engaging with subject matter expert in a domain you are likely not an expert in, there may be some suspicion that you won't be able to help, right? Like These people are often solicited for information by all sorts of groups. And so what I was trying to establish is one, good rapport, right? It's easier to work with somebody. It's easier to talk with somebody if they feel good about you. And so a little bit of chatting up front is a good thing to help ease that. But also I added some info that I relayed info that I had in a kind of, is this true way? Like, aren't you on the back foot often? Aren't you like regularly monitoring, and hackers that can come in and be aggressive about that, so that I can display that I have some knowledge about the area. Like I've thought about this a little bit. So I'm not an expert, but I'm not just somebody who doesn't know how to open a computer. Right. So you can talk to me, basically, is what I was trying to establish. So Alec is right. We've not even dug in at all. Like not even like I haven't asked anything about the data, not really. It's just kind of high level. I'll be leading into that shortly, right? Or we'll be leading into that shortly after we get the rapport in. Does that make sense?
Yep, that makes sense.
Yeah. John, you want to add anything to that or?
No, I was kind of lost in terms of how do you say like actionable information to put into an ontology. I wasn't thinking of these like softer skills that were going on. So
Pretty important.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I want to like add, John, like maybe even I was lost, but if I understand the question, like is it like competency questions, ontology development, and the role of subject matter experts? So recently, when I was like, I'm writing another paper for FACES.
Mhm.
So the idea being like, uh, uh, automatically extracting competency questions from solitude and transference corpus. So what happened is it like gave me like 3,000 and odd competency questions.
Mhm.
So there's a lots of data. So what I did is when I was like going back and forth, I understand with your discussions with the subject matter experts, there was some four core focused kind of questions which the chatbot can answer, which may not be present in the any of the books, or because it comes from experience and all. So what I did is like I tried to influence the competency questions that was generated from the corpus using the patterns that was extracted from the ontologists like you, Bill, and the subject matter experts. So straight away, like from 3,257 competency questions that were extracted from the corpus,
Mhm.
after the influence with the patterns extracted from the subject matter experts, it came to like 300, more focused
Mhm.
competency questions.
This is valuable.
So I think, yes,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's valuable.
Good.
Both are needed because
Yeah.
we get like more kind of new information from the like, any kind of data. And also the like, the relevance based on experience and, based on your intellectual ability and all, you can get like, more kind of competency not most
Mhm.
of corporates.
Yeah. I think so good. So I think the theme through the responses here is good. So you were initially not sure what information you should be taking from the back and forth. Hopefully you see now, right?
Mhm.
Like some of this is a social skill, right? And it's important to be able to engage people like this. It just is. Like we just have to do it. People as I've said many times, people are the biggest hurdle in our community. If there weren't people, everything would be fine. But we do have to work together. And because of that, we have to like be able to recognize where people are coming from, help people feel comfortable. We have to genuinely be comfortable with them so that we can get information. And if you don't, if you're like, maybe I don't need to worry about too much of the social skills, I won't get on a pedestal here, but let me just say you are wrong. Because people will destroy your progress and your community if you let them. And a one way to have that happen is to kind of not be personal. And big personalities kind of like come in ham-fisted and try to push agendas and stuff. People get ostracized. People feel bad. People stop talking to one another. Silos emerge on the social level. silos emerging on a social level lead to silos in the information level and all that good stuff. And it's just the same pattern that repeats again and again and again. And we're trying to mitigate that. We're trying to help. And part of that is just we got to learn to communicate with one another. So I'm not surprised that it wasn't obvious what to take away, but hopefully what you're taking away now is I should start off with a little chattiness. And now we can cycle, now we can push into what you guys, I'm sure you guys are like dying to get into. And I'm going to let you do that part. Now we can start getting in, asking some of the more specific questions. So John, Alec, Dottie, floor is yours. What can we ask Sane to get closer to the kind of technical information that we'll need? I did the charming part for you. So Alec, you mentioned something about a schema, right?
Yeah, so I was thinking of a slightly more informative way to say it, but yeah, since Sane, since you're a cyber expert, you probably also directly deal with data, right? So some SMEs don't actually deal with data. So I'm wondering, like, what things in the world do you collect data about, or what are the most important things that you collect data about?
Yeah, that's a good question. There are, I think, two main forms of data that sort of are at the top of the list. Yeah, one is network data, and that's all TCP/IP traffic. So TCP/IP packets, looking at those, like, hey, what's going in and out at what speed? Is their client generating a lot of packets? What's in the packets? What's the destination of the packets? So anything around surrounding TCP/IP packets is interesting. We need to always be able to dig in those packets from any angle. So we need sort of full control on that. And another one is, with malicious software, is that we look for signatures. And the signatures can be sort of in the software files themselves, but the signatures might also be in the type of processes that they start on servers, that you think like, hey, that this type of software does not belong on that type of server. Just saying, for example, if you have a database server, why would there be a web server running now on the database server? That's odd. So you're looking for patterns also in files themselves so that you can scan them on disk, but you're also looking for patterns of types of applications that are started. And lastly, also then the times at which they are started. In database server, the database should always be up. It's sort of like, that's. But if there's anything else being started up regularly, you wouldn't want to know that. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot of data about data. Actually, it's a lot. It's a bit meta. It's data about TCP packets. It's data about software programs. It's data about processes.
Mm-hmm. This is good. So I'm gonna pause here. So in the chat, I put first I said write down what he says, and just as an exercise, I wanted to display. So hopefully you guys were jotting them down. If I were in a meeting with SME, I would be doing exactly what I just did in the chat. I wouldn't be doing it in the chat. I'd have a folder or a file open. I'd be recording what he's saying. Of course, we have the recordings here, and I usually record these sessions. I could go back, but it's good even for the back and forth here to have this information. So what I wrote were TCP packets, elements of packets, malicious software, signatures, server files, code running processes potentially kicked off by malicious code, scannable disks, application types, and temporal information. Sure, I didn't get everything. Some of these are things I would use to ask for more information about. Like, for example, I mean, I know what is meant by a signature, but I suspect not everybody will know what a signature is. So that might be something I ask. Well, what is it? Could you tell me more about what a signature is? Right? Or TCP/IP, maybe want to know more about that, or the elements of packets. So I added the elements part because Sonny mentioned we want to know what's inside the packets, right? And so you could unpack that metaphor, pun intended. What sorts of things are inside the packets, right? Like what could I be looking for? Was there anything else that you guys picked up on that's not on the list, or is there anything you want more information about here from the list, that is?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know what half these words mean.
There we go. So we should dig in there, right? What you don't want is just to kind of leave it, in the aether. So you're going to need to be able to unpack this stuff. And so you're not the SME, but you have this golden opportunity to talk with somebody who probably loves to talk about this stuff. And so you can serve both those masters of like getting the information, also giving them an opportunity to do something they like to do, which is probably explain this stuff. So where should we start, John?
I guess the first item on that list would be good, the TCP/IP packets.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Well, it's quite technical, so I would need to look for a good explanation. Basically, IP packets are data packets that go between two destinations. So I can send an IP packet, but an IP packet has just a fixed length. It depends a bit on your network configuration, but commonly it's like 4 kilobytes. Now, the thing is, maybe you would like to send something that's longer than 4 kilobytes, or you're expecting a reply, and that's where the TCP also comes in. That is sort of, you have a conversation. It means like, hey, I'm sending IP packets and they're numbered. And if the receiver, knowing that they're numbered, is expecting then packet number 1, number 2. And if he sees number 4 without number 3, then he needs to do something about it. And then that's sort of the TCP layer where you say like, hey, can you resend number 3? Because I got number 4, but I didn't get number 3. So that's roughly how, those TCP and IP layers are separated. And then in the IP packets, there's things like destination address, where should it go? And that's also where routing comes in. That's a separate topic, but let's just say that a packet has an address. It goes through the network, and each hop in the network knows how to resolve that address. But that's another large topic, which is not directly of interest. I think for now it's enough to understand that a packet has a content and an address, and TCP is sort of a sequence of IP packets that sender and receiver are communicating about.
So tell me, guys, what? So I asked to write this down, like write down. So what are you gathering from Sani's explanation? There's some processes involved, right?
Yeah, I was struggling to take notes as well, trying to figure out what was actually being said, because I couldn't quite figure out what was referring to what, if that makes sense. Like I understand the idea of packets being sent, but I don't know what the TCP in this case is, or what the IP is until the very end. So
It happens. It's good that you got there, and you can, just as a kind of a pro tip, you can always ask again, right? You might also, instead of doing that though, you might just say, "Oh, you were right. It was a little technical." Is there like an authoritative place I could look, just so I start grokking what's going on? Someplace that you would recommend? Is it just Wikipedia, or do you have like a preferred place that you would look for understanding TCP/IP? That might be a question you're asking. I would say that not just about TCP/IP, but in any, like, say this, is there a virus? Is there's like a list of authoritative viruses or malicious code, like stuff like that. Does that make sense?
yes, yeah.
Yeah. How about Alex, Dottie? What are you guys taking away? Hopefully you were writing stuff down. Good. Okay. Alec wrote TCP/IP packets are data packets, and data packets have content and an address. It's good. It's good. It's like fleshing it out already.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess where I would go is maybe more clarification on, the TC PIP. So the way I couldn't tell in the way that you were talking about it whether they were two different kinds of packets or if TCP/IP is like a one kind of packet. Um, and if they're two different kinds, then what explicitly is the difference between the two?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the packets, all packets are essentially IP packets because every packet just gets sent individually. And there is, apart from the address and the payload of the packet, there is this additional information about what sequence of which number in the sequence of packets is this packet. And that's then used sort of on a negotiation level, like, hey, can you send or resend this?
Mhm.
So it might be that a stream of packets goes from a sender to a receiver. The receiver misses one packet and he can send then a TCP packet back, but there isn't really a payload in it, but it says something like, hey, I'm missing number 3. So then it uses still IP packets, but without data, but with remarks about like, hey, I would like you to resend number 3 because I didn't get it. So TCP is more a specification on top of the semi-physical packets. It is sort of like, hey, how do we have a conversation over? It's a protocol, really.
That's right. There we go. So I think that's the key word, and it's in TCP. The P in TCP and the P in IP, these are
Yeah.
protocols. So it's TCP is the transfer. What is it? Transmission
Protocol.
control protocol, and then the IP is the information protocol. And so it's like kind of rules for packet transmission. They are referred to. These packets are often referred to as information packets, which can be a little bit confusing. But it's good to like poke in there because, from our understanding, folks who build using BFO ontologies, there's basically guidelines. There's rules that have to be followed. And this is coming out from what you're saying. You're like, oh, you didn't send me everything I need. There's a prescription or a directive that was not satisfied. Here's something to do if that happens. Go back, try it again, do the, what is it, get, push, whatever, like the handshake, whatever. Do the handshake thing, get it right. On. If you satisfy that, then we'll have the packet transmission. So there's certainly, from our perspective, information layer here, and then I'm seeing that, and so I would push into that sort of space of like describing not exactly the details of the protocol, but but what do you need? How much detail maybe you need to model on a day-to-day or understand on a day-to-day from the protocols? Because these things can be quite cumbersome to model. If we wanted to explore that's the direction I would head. That way I can understand better like how you're using the protocols or what you look for, what you see. We may not need to model the whole protocol. Yeah. Does that make sense, guys?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
It would be helpful to know, specifically the kinds of data that are collected about these
Mhm.
the TCP packets and the IP packets. Although depending on how receptive the SME is, I might ask a little more, John, like what you were saying, but
Mhm.
um, maybe I would want to know more about like the structure of
The protocol.
yeah how they relate to how the two
Yeah.
relate to one another a little bit more.
This, as and this is kind of a general, I have a rule of thumb around this. I usually try, unless the SME is just very technically minded, usually try not to ask the real specific details of like protocols, for example. One, because I can just look them up because they're pretty well documented. And two, I don't want to put them in a position where they feel like they have to kind of pull stuff from long-term memory that they're an expert in, and maybe it's not something they think about very often. The thing they probably bring, or that probably speaks to them most directly in a day-to-day is like whatever information they actually need to know about the protocol, not like the full spec. So this is why I was directing it. It's like, oh, so what do you need? Like one, you've brought this up. So like, what exactly sort of information are you pulling out of the protocol for your day-to-day? Could you tell me about the structure of that, basically? And then it kind of narrows the scope because it's something that I'm confident they're going to be familiar with, like off the top of their head. And I can both support that with external research and not like put them in a position where they felt like they should have been able to answer a question that I asked. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
But to your point, right, we can ask about, with respect to TCP/IP, like you brought up kind of the handshake stuff, the packet passing. Is it just like, on off packets, like you got it, you didn't? Is there like patterns that you're looking for? Is there something else you're looking for when you're thinking about TCP/IP?
Yeah, I mean, roughly speaking, and the TCP/IP protocol is complex, and there is a book about 800 pages thick.
Yeah,
So
right.
it's a lot of work to put that all in. And but just sketching high over what would be sort of a starting point to where things start to make sense, or starting points where I would say, hey, this feels like we're getting somewhere. Is like, hey, we have a sender and a receiver, and it can be a malicious sender, it can be a malicious receiver. Those receivers, the sender uses a certain protocol, and again, sort of a database server shouldn't output an HTTP protocol, for example. That's suspect. So that's already sort of a starting point where you start saying like, hey, if I see any communication with HTTP, there is a web server. So there is a process that is running a web server. What kind of software is that process then running? So that's sort of like a few hops. Like you look at what's being sent. From what's being sent, you sort of start to understand like, hey, this might be it. And what process is running that, and how come is it running that?
Right.
That's sort of a simple and between which receiver and which machine is incoming and outgoing, well, from your own domain perspective, but also to which party outside your network is it sending or receiving, and which protocol.
Yeah, right. So in my mind, I have a question that I think will really kind of highlight the ontological aspect, I like the value of some of what we do. But before I throw that in, I want you guys to ask questions based on what Sane just said. So he's given us a lot of really valuable information about workflow, what he's interested in, what's important. So I want you to think for a second about pain points. Now, of course, you can just ask him pain points, but think about what he's just described. It just puts your kind of, if I were doing this hat on, do you see any pain points that he might be encountering? Do you see anything that might be hard to do? Like hard to track, hard to model, hard to record, hard to integrate with other data, or hard to predict? You should have Jeopardy music, right? You have to ask in the form of a question.
Well, hey, this is John. I've missed the past couple of ones, and then I came in just now, so I'm not sure what I'm trying to answer.
Yeah. So we're engaged in exploration of a cyber domain, cyber threat analysis, and Sani is our resident subject matter expert on this topic. And so we're poking around trying to uncover information about the domain with Sani's help. We've written down some things that he said that were important so far. So TCP/IP packets, their elements, malicious software, server files, scannable disks, application types, stuff like that. And now we're kind of unpacking some of the information as if we don't know much about the domain, and we're just trying to describe what he's seeing. And so I think in his most recent description, he gave us some opportunities to dig into the other part of subject matter engagement, which is not just describing the situation they're encountering, but like where the pain points are, like what is so hard about what you do, because that helps us get insight into how we can help. So I think he gave us good info here to like lean in or segue into pain points.
So like we know these, obviously they can track a packet because they know the packet number or something in the log. Is that true?
Sounds like you can track packets. Yeah.
Okay. And then you can also, like, if there's intruders or something, there's something that you'll get hit, but you get hit because you're looking for it, but it also has some kind of ID, but it could scramble its ID or change its ID number
Mhm.
to confuse you.
Now the hard part is twofold. It's like in a network there is a tremendous amount of traffic going on. So it's
Right.
not like you see anything because it's big. So but what you can do is start to sort of write down what you expect and then sort of evaluate these packets. Is this conforming to my expectations? And an expectation is basically, yeah, so you have the IP protocol on top of that TCP protocol, and on top of that, for example, the HTTP protocol. And also it's
Yeah.
sort of a layered system. And then you can say, do I expect an HTTP protocol going from this server in my server domain outside? Do I expect that? That's sort of a thing that you would like to ask. Because there's a lot of traffic that you just expect. If there is HTTP traffic from a laptop, an employee going out, yeah, somebody's browsing the web, you expect that. So you're basically looking at a combination of which machine is using which protocols. Because in the end, it is about the communication. I mean, either software is being sent in for exploitation or data is extracted out. But it's always on the protocol level where you have to start thinking like, hey, what is going in and out and how? That gives a fair part of information. There's more like the processes on servers, but communication is a very big part. And sort of being able to jot down, hey, this is a laptop. What do I expect from that laptop? Sort of like, hey, this laptop uses HTTP, maybe makes connection to the Active Directory. Maybe if it's a developer laptop, it directly maybe accesses a database, but that's only for developers because I wouldn't expect employees to contact databases unless there may be a data scientist or have some development function. So it's
like
about
go ahead.
It's about expected, being able to write down expectations and then to match the traffic you see against those expectations. And then the question is, how do you formalize, I guess, these expectations?
Yeah, because I'm hearing categories, right? Bucket them to say, if you have this piece of equipment and we'd have to know that it's their role, right? The person that's operating on that, we would have to assume they're sitting there and then say, okay, their role is this. They can access these things. What things can they access? Kind of categorize that, and then say, is something out of the norm, right? If they're not in this category and they're accessing something out of that category, that's kind of an alert, right? To say, hey,
Yeah.
this doesn't seem right. But then also the same, I would think, is it more, are we talking more about it within the, let's say within the firewall or outside the firewall coming in as well? We're looking at both aspects, right?
Yeah, in general, you have access to traffic inside of the firewall.
Right.
And in general, your network is sort of put in zones. So any communication across zones. You have sort of the gateways to monitor that. But also in a network itself, you can basically scoop up all the traffic if you would like that.
So I hear facet and then categories under each facet, right? Because you just said something within the network. I forgot what you said, but yeah, it made me think of facets and I forgot it. Um, so identifying these facets that you want within the firewall, but then also there's the outside. Yeah, but I forgot what you said.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to figure out what part you didn't hear, but
Yeah, I know, right?
in general, I would say there is a sort of a machine which is a server. Can be a database server, can be a web server, can be an Active Directory server, and nobody is using it. But that server has a certain function or role, or I don't know how to, but it's sort of a certain type. I don't know how to describe that. And you also sometimes have a laptop by an employee, and that employee then has a certain type that has consequences for the laptop he or she is using.
Yeah.
I think that sort of writes it down. And then those two type machines, either servers or laptops or workstations or PCs, maybe personal computers is maybe the best description. I don't know if it's old fashioned.
So there's
and they communicate, and you want to look at that communication.
Yeah, there's a lot going on here. Sane, you sort of just told us the most, which was very helpful, the most general strategy that you employ for finding threats, right? Is you have these expectations, then you look at the data for deviations from those expectations. But now, in order to, create the ontologies, we need in the Sparkle queries, we need to drill down more into, the particular kinds of threats that you care about and the particular patterns of behavior that are associated with each one. I think. I don't know if it's slightly too soon to go in that direction, John, but
I think that's fine.
that's sort of what
I mean, this is where I was hoping that would lead, right? These are because I think what will happen as the descriptions, or well, one thing, let me back up. One thing Sane already mentioned that the script, like that the expectations versus reality is challenging. So he said he alerted to us to that. There's already a pain point lurking. It's like digging into that is a good move, right? Figuring out what that is, curious or not. Like that, if you hear a subject matter expert say this is hard, ask more, right?
Yeah.
Their pain points, right? And so getting clear on that is useful. Also, I mean, to my mind, like understanding this terrain a bit, I on the data side, I know how a lot of organizations tend to operate with this, and there's a lot of manual labor that goes in, unfortunately, for and so I think some of this is going to be familiar pain points to us. And this is exactly the sort of area where I would want to dig in about the expectations versus reality analysis, because I think it will uncover both familiar territory, and this is what I'm queuing in on. I'm thinking, oh, I know how to help in this territory. When I say familiar territory, I'm like, we can help you. But again, also, he said as much. So good instinct, Alec. I think we should dig in there. Let's do it. Alec, you want to?
So
Yeah, or maybe you already got it.
where do you want to dig in?
Well, yeah, I'm curious about the particular, the main kinds of threats that you're worried about in your day-to-day work. Firstly, just tell us about what those are.
Yeah, it's So it's hard to give a blanket description of that because there is so many things that can happen. So in a way, I tend to stay a bit on the oversight part. But in general, if you have data, you're concerned about privacy. Is somebody reading it whilst he or she shouldn't be reading it? That's one thing. A second thing is integrity. Is data being changed? Simple example would be an account balance. I mean, if you can just change an account balance, you can become rich. So integrity. So exfiltration, reading. Second is changing. Yeah, and a third big one is obviously destroying. So yeah, making sure that the data is no longer that sort of maybe changing, but it's a bit more subtle because real destruction you might notice because applications stop working, or unexpected things start to happen. But changing data, everything, and reading data, everything goes on without you noticing anything. So there's three categories in the end that you're worried about. And within these categories, there are limitless possibilities by hackers to abuse that. But it's reading things that are not supposed to be read. It is changing things that are not supposed to be changed, and it's deleting things that should be kept.
That is incredibly valuable information. Right? The subject matter expert has basically given us structure that we can play in. And this is how Sonny's thinking about this. This is very valuable. It doesn't mean it's like the end all, the only way, but certainly this is how he's engaging with his day to day. So that's fantastic. And of course, you're absolutely right. Like multiple ways to do each of these three things, infinite ways to do these things. Now I would dig in a little. I would try to like narrow the scope, just pick one. Pick something like, let's see, because we're close to the end of the meeting, I would probably want to lead on like or leave on like a positive note, like leave some warm and fuzzy. So at this point, I would ask something along the lines of a high-low question, but I just leave off the low part, which is, what's your biggest success? Like what baddie did you catch that was just the coolest, right? You're going to learn a lot because he's going to be excited about it. He's going to be telling you a lot about the details, and you want to know the details, but you also want to leave on a good note and like talk about what this looks like when it goes well in the day to day. Then when we meet again, we can do the other side, the low. Tell me about when it got away, man. Like what happened? Because you're going to learn a lot of valuable information there too. But right now, near end of the meeting, tell us about a time where you nailed them to the wall.
Well, I'll open the chest of war stories.
There we go.
And I enjoy talking about that a lot.
Of course.
It makes me feel good, warm, and fuzzy.
Exactly. Of course. And it's fun to hear. Like, these are great. Do you guys understand why I was asking this? Or what the point of me asking that? One, it's kind of a feel-good way to end. But two, just as importantly, okay, yeah, I see you later. But just as importantly, there's an opportunity to hear what success looks like. And so we're talking about processes, like we've helped very much by like a scaffolding for 3 different targets we can focus in on when we're doing our structuring. But also we want to know what it looks like when Sana's job goes as best as it can. And next time we'll ask about what happens when it doesn't. We're going to learn a lot of valuable information from both of those descriptions, so we can see what it should look like to his mind, and then what probably it looks more like day to day. Because we likely wouldn't be talking if things didn't or couldn't be improved. So, and this will, putting it another way, this sort of high-low question will give us boundaries, like kind of help us understand the art of the possible, and in a sense, and then we're going to live in the middle somewhere trying to help out. We're probably not going to be able to offer like resources or tools that are going to make every engagement a successful one, but we're going to try to move him from the closer and closer to that. that make sense? Okay. I'm going to do something slightly different now than what we typically do in our cycles, because I want to make sure that folks are, getting what kind of the drill practice that we need. So 2 minutes, takeaways. So from the exercise, tell me what you've learned briefly, sentence or two. What are you taking away from this that you're going to remember? And I know you're thinking, John, don't put me on the spot. I'm absolutely going to put you on the spot. This is how you get it into your long-term memory. So, and I want you to learn it. And Kevin just dropped off. He's like, nope, I'm out. Oh man. What are you guys? Dottie, Sane, what are you taking away from this?
Actually, I'm completely new to most of the things like protocols and all, but I did understand how it is important when we start starting a project or digging deep into anything, what are the things we have to keep it in mind in all the areas around, not just focusing on only the single thing.
Yeah, good. Okay, so getting the insight of digging in, that's probably the social aspect, and then the content side. Hopefully we learned some stuff about, okay, maybe not dig in too much about that here. I'll do my own research.
Yeah, yes.
I don't put too much of a cognitive load on my SME. There are other things I can ask him that I might not be able to research so easily. And that's kind of a good place to think. Sana, you are our very saintly SME today. How about you?
Well, I better look into what TCP packets, how they're built exactly for next time. I think I got away with it.
I love it. Yeah, you did well. So, yeah, I thank you very much. I appreciate you.
John, do you have just 1 minute?
Sure. Yeah, I have a minute after this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
All right. Well, guys, yeah, it was fantastic. We'll talk soon. Sonny, I'll reach out to you as soon as I get out of meetings. But
Sure.
yeah, yes, sir.
Talk
All right.
later.
Well, thank you so much for participating. We'll see you soon. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Till next week.
Yes,
Later.
sir. All right.
Yeah.
Later.